I'm Kevin Davis, and this is the Catholic Family Podcast. And I'm very happy to be joined today by, well, what do we call it? Well, let's call him a social media influencer, maybe a Twitter influencer. I don't know if he's as much on these other sites as he is on Twitter, but he's moving up there, getting up in the ranks of the big boys. I think he's hoping after this podcast he's going to get to 10,000 followers, and he's one of the more vocal guys in terms of, well, just about everything, but especially these days, talking about sedevacantism, talking about faith, talking about truth. I think that's really what he's about, talking about things that are. And I think that we don't hear that enough these days, especially from people who have more than 10 followers on Twitter. And so I think that's really why I wanted to have him on and have him tell us his story on Twitter. I think he's Matthew Theo. Is that what it was? I keep forgetting.
Matthew Theo. Yeah, that's right.
All right. So Matthew on Twitter at Matthew Theo. And go follow the guy, for goodness sake, because he's got to get to that 10,000. I don't know. Do you get like cookies if you get to 10,000?
We get cannolis. That's Italian.
Well, hey, that's even better than cookies. Hey, that's nice. Cool. Well, Matthew, and I would love to hear today about your story, because I know that it's an interesting one of how you came to the sedevacantist position, or not, excuse me, it's not a position, to the truth of sedevacantism, that the knowledge that there is no Pope in Rome and has not been since 1958. So I'm just going to let you run with it. Who are you? Where do you come from? And why are you where you are now?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I just wanted to kind of preface this or start by saying I hope that the listeners remember that this is just a conversation between, two friends, two guys just talking about topics, and that I am no authority figure on any of this. So anything that I have to say, I hope the listeners investigate that for themselves. But yeah, before I open up a little bit about myself, I wanted to share a quote before I share my journey to the truth, as you called it. Pope Saint Leo the Ninth said, "By the see of the chief of the apostles, namely by the Roman Church, through the same Peter, as well as through his successors, have not the comments of all of the heretics been disapproved, rejected, and overcome in the hearts of the brethren in the faith of Peter, which so far neither has failed nor up to the end will fail, been strengthened." So, my parents were typical John Paul II conservatives. You're probably familiar with the term a bit, Kevin. And basically, what that meant was Catholics who attended the Novus Ordo, who were conservative on social issues, abortion, gay marriage, contraception. And I think to the younger users, to the younger listeners who are joining us today, I wish that who only know Bergoglio's reign, I wish they got to experience or see the dramatic, the charismatic, quote unquote, papacy of John Paul II. I was thinking of this the other day, and I was like, you know what? We were really ultramontanists back then. He was adored everywhere he went. I can still hear every room he sat in, every ground he walked on. JP2, we love you was filled the air. Um, he was adored, and I remember, even being young, I had a sense of the faith being something that is sacred, of a decorum, of a reverence, of something that is supernatural. And so when I was younger and I would see some of the things that I saw in the Novus Ordo, very similar to what Father Cicada once said in an interview where he said, he was in the seminary at the time, and all of these abuses were going on, and he said he felt that if only the Pope Paul VI knew of all of this, everything would be okay. And I think as a young child in the Novus Ordo, seeing things that just didn't feel right, didn't seem right, didn't look right, uh, didn't correlate or correspond to what I thought our faith should be, I would think I would say, if only the Pope knew, if only John Paul II saw what was going on here, everything would be fine. And that belief stuck with me. He was larger than life, and when he ended up dying, that really was really upsetting for me. As a young child, I thought that the Pope was immortal. I thought that truly that he was going to just live. He was always the Pope of the Catholic Church, and he was loved. And I remember the tears, the crying, the emotion that just poured out over his death. And so, with the death of John Paul II, it really caught my attention, I think you could say, as a Catholic. And so, not too long later, Benedict the 16th was elected. And, he was kind of like everything that I felt a Catholic should be. I saw the reverence, I saw the decorum, I saw all the pomp and circumstance that I looked for. As someone who, as again, have an inclination of the faith being something that is solemn, that is serious, that is, we should make our faith something glorious. And I absolutely loved him. I completely fell in love with Ratzinger. And so I remember at the time starting to take my faith a bit more seriously, and just starting to study more. He caught my attention, and so I decided to read. I decided to watch, shows on television. I think YouTube was a thing at that point. I think I must have browsed the internet for videos and whatnot. And I learned that, like, wow, there's more to my Catholic faith than being a good person, which I thought was the be all end all here. I learned that confession was something that Catholics did. I thought it was, as a kid, I thought going to confession was a way for a young child to learn how to practice admitting he or she was wrong. And I did use only two genders in that statement. I know that's controversial.
Oh,
I
yeah,
know,
we're gonna get canceled.
risky. Sorry, sorry if I cancel your podcast. Yeah. So, um, yeah. So I thought I didn't know adults did that. I didn't know that somebody, can sin and then just go to confession. The rosary, I've heard of it, but I never prayed it. It was never really prayed. And so I began to learn of all these aspects of our faith. And so I remember it was 2008. I had to look this up, but it was 2008 when Benedict the 16th came to the U.S. And I was just like over the moon, really. I thought that was incredible. I remember thinking, like, the ground is holy. The Pope is here. Like, this is just like, what more could I mean, this is just an incredible moment in history. And again, it inspired me. I wanted to take my faith more seriously.
And real quick,
Um,
before you go
yeah.
on, when you say that you started then to pray the rosary and to go to confession, what did your faith consist of before? I mean, you say JP2 Catholic, but in
Mhm.
action, what did that mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, it really meant, I would say, nothing more than the bare minimum of
Hmm.
Novus Ordo on the weekend, and that was it. And then during the week, maybe saying a prayer before bed, and just quote unquote being a good person throughout the week. Um, I
But
never
mass
really
on
read
Sunday.
scripture. Yeah, that was about, yeah, that was about it.
Yeah. Okay.
And then anytime you wanted to argue about abortion or what, I don't think, thinking back, I don't think gay marriage was much of a prevalent issue. I think even amongst, if I can say, the leftists, I think it was pretty much understood that marriage was really a man and a woman. But still,
Crazy thought.
uh, you know, yeah, times shift quickly. Um, which is another thing too that I wish the younger generation knew, that it wasn't that far long ago where the left, if we can use that phrase, I think Obama campaigned on it, that marriage is between a man and a woman, originally in 2008. So quite a shift. But yeah, so I think at that point, again, I really started to study and read and learn a little bit more. I joined, I think you and I, we talked about this, an internet message board. People are probably like, what in the world is that? But it was a place where you can make an account and then uh, post among other people. And I joined a Catholic one. And yeah, so Benedict the 16th was in the United States. I remember starting to pray my rosary a bit. I knew that I had to go to confession after however many years now. And when I say confession, to Novus Ordo, quote unquote clergy, but I'm still a moment in my journey. And after that, I remember there was a moment, and and I've used this as a really big defining point for me in my journey. I was coming home from college, and I had an inclination to go to confession. And we say God works in mysterious ways, and this is certainly a strange kind of twist to things. I was driving home. I got off to find something to eat, and I saw a sign. I won't say the name, but Catholic church up the road. There was an arrow, and I turned to go up the street, and I knocked on the door, and a woman answered, and I said, "Yeah, I would, I would just like to know if there's a priest around to hear my confession." And she said, "Yeah, sure, you can wait right here, and I'll get Father for you." And I said, "Great." And one of the ironic things about this is that the man who heard my confession actually left the priesthood, um, and practices a homosexual lifestyle. So I won't say names, I won't say places, but quite a twist, because this was, very much an inverse, I guess you can call it, of a of circumstance. One of the things that I told him was work makes getting to quote unquote mass Novus Ordo difficult. I can't always make it. And he told me that there's a church not too far from here that has, masses throughout the day on Sunday. So whatever your schedule is, you can probably find a time that works for you. And I thought that was great. This was like an answer really to prayer, I thought at the time. And so he gave me the name of the church. I remember going, and the first thing I did was look at a bulletin so I could find all of the times that masses were said. And at the very bottom, 6 p.m., traditional Latin mass was listed on the bulletin. I had never heard of a traditional Latin mass. I had no idea what that was. I wanted, really, when I saw that, I wanted nothing to do with it. I thought it was an attempt, and actually my inclination, I think, was right at the time, but I thought it was an attempt to split the church. I thought it was an attempt to make a dual church, a Novus Ordo part of the Catholic Church and a TLM part um, of the church, and I opposed it. I wondered why anyone would want to attend a liturgy in a language they didn't understand. The typical arguments. The people that I argue with, I once made those arguments. Why would anyone want this? And so I went to that message board that I was telling you about, and there was a priest on there, and I told him, I'll never forget these words. I said, this church near here offers this thing called the traditional Latin Mass. What is that? What do you think? And I remember he said to me, the traditional Latin Mass tends to call serious Catholics. You should go. And I'm a serious Catholic. Very. I'm at the advanced level here. Of course, I have to go to this. Is what I thought at the time. So like it was a video game. So his advice to me was sit in the back, watch, and just kind of mirror what the people do in front of you. And I was a little nervous because it's a brand new experience for me. I mean, I could recite the Novus Ordo from start to finish. The amount of times I've gone, I knew every song, I knew every moment. I mean, I just was engrossed in it.
Do you want to sing one for us now?
Oh, I with the organ. I have a
next time, huh?
One bread, one body. Yeah,
Oh boy.
I can sing. Yeah, I will certainly next time. Yeah, so I went in, and I remember seeing things that to some people might seem strange to hear, but I never saw a woman veiled before. That was the first time for me. Never saw that. So it was shocking. I heard chant coming through. There was a choir up at the choir loft up at the top. Never heard that before. But immediately, as you can imagine, my soul was elevated a bit. And then everything started. I remember all of the servers and the priest. He actually was a real priest. He was ordained in 1958. Still saying the old mass here at the diocesan Indult parish. And it started, and Father and all the servers, they went up to the altar. They genuflected. They began the Asperges, and there was chant and there was incense, and I have no problem admitting that it made me tear up a bit. I had never, ever seen anything like this. Um, and it was as if I discovered a new religion. It was as if that the Catholicism that I was kind of longing for, or the Catholicism that I knew in my heart somewhere had to exist, was suddenly here. And I I knew that I immediately, all it took was one time to erase 20ish whatever years of Novus Ordo, that I can't go back. Like this is unbelievable. And I remember getting in the car after, and then wondering, who took this from us? Why don't we have this? Where did this go, and why? And that kind of became a focal point of mine with research, with studying, with the internet, with learning. Where did this go, and why did they want to take it away? So I began to exclusively attend the traditional mass at the Indult parish. And people don't know this, but I ended up serving it. I remember it was like a few weeks in, and one of the guys, he stopped me in the parking lot, and he was like, you know, I see you here every week. Would you mind joining us to serve? And I immediately wanted no part of that. I'm like, you have to understand that this is new to me. I really don't know what I'm doing. I don't know any words of Latin. How am I going to serve this mass? But with practice, repetition, I did every role. I was the MC, master of ceremonies, for a number of years. So I got to really learn the mass well, why everything happens, all the responses, all the prayers, what the priest is, everything. I got to know the ins and outs of the old mass, and that made it even more meaningful to me. Um, and so as time went by, I journeyed into the Institute of Christ the King, and it was really there where I began to experience an even greater shift because um, I knew that we were fighting against our own church. I realized that we were in the minority. I realized that we did not possess the faith or the liturgy that Rome promulgated, and that this was a battle, that this was a war, and we have to fight it. And so I think that part of my journey really helps me relate to people who are still there because I did that. I took part in that. I was ready to to go out in the streets. And we've got to protest this bishop. We've got to march for the traditional Latin mass. We've got to send a message to the vicar of Christ that this is what we the faithful want. And I was really empowered by that. I felt like a God warrior. I felt like putting on that armor of Christ and going out and fighting for the church, and I was proud of that. And I realized as I continued to study that this just didn't seem right. And I went back to my inclination as a child, where I saw all these abuses, where I saw very strange and disgusting and profane things happen at the altar. If only John Paul II knew, if only the Pope knew. But then I came to find that not only were they okay with this, but they did this, they promoted this, they took part in this, and that really shook me. I found out about Assisi. I found out about pagan witch doctors. I found out about all these things, and I was like, well, wait, my safety net of if only I follow the Pope might be disappearing a little bit because they're doing what unsettled me. Where I thought, I had refuge, I'm finding actually contradiction. And that was when I really, I kind of took the approach again, as you see a lot of people on Twitter, and I was once there. We just have bad popes. We just have popes that really, maybe they don't mean to, maybe they do, maybe they don't, maybe they're just trying to do what they think is right, but we're just in a bad situation where they don't know. And so finally, really, I guess you can say on my quote unquote journey, a turning point again was I would get into some debates with people who were Orthodox, the Eastern Schismatics. And a focal point of that conversation was the papacy, which they obviously reject. And so I spent so much time, I wanted to know what the church taught throughout her history, from the apostles to the early church to, I don't know, the medieval times, the Renaissance, throughout all of these ages, all the way up until 1958. I knew pre-Vatican, I knew Vatican II was a cutoff of where I wanted to be, all the way. And what I found was in this research and in this compilation of documents and encyclicals and papal bulls and writings, was that throughout all of the men, all of the popes, all of the councils, all of the saints, it spoke with one voice that there's a primacy here of Peter. And this one voice spoke through 1900 years of a crystal clear message that submission to the Roman pontiff is necessary for salvation. What does submission mean? How is that submission expressed? How do you live that submission? And I found the message to be very clear. And I would present it to the Eastern Schismatics, the Orthodox, and they would say, okay, fair point, apply it to yourself. And I would say, I can't. Like, no, like, stop here. You know, it doesn't work with Bergoglio. It doesn't work with Francis. It doesn't work with Benedict. It doesn't work with John Paul II. Um, and I realized that this was a very problematic position. And so I think there I kind of catapulted again into the SSPX, which I thought was the be all end all here. I had valid sacraments. I had real Catholicism. They didn't sign the documents, all of them anyway, I believe, of Vatican II. And I had still my Pope. I thought this was the be all end all. But again, I had my research and my study that found, you know, this resisting this the Pope is here, but do contrary. Um, it's not Catholic, and it's never been taught. And I remember I heard somebody say, um, just because we have examples of men in the past resisting the Pope doesn't mean they were allowed to. You can run through a red light. You can do that. Doesn't mean it was okay to do. And in the same way, just because somebody can say, well, look, so and so resisted Pope Clement or whatever you want to throw out there, doesn't mean that was right. Doesn't mean it was the Catholic position to take.
Well, and it
Um,
just makes sense too, right? I mean, it's one of those things that people overcomplicate it. I think it's just, if you start looking at it just simply, I mean, if you think that you don't always have to listen to the Pope, then you're practically a Protestant, right? You can just start saying, well, no, I don't like that. I don't like that one. I don't like what he said there, so I'm just not going to do it. I mean, because what I've learned, what I know, that's actually better than the Pope. It just practically doesn't make sense. I mean, it just means we can make any decision for anything. What's the point of having a
right.
Pope? What's the point of having a hierarchy or a church when the decision comes down to us? And I think it's really basic, but it's easy to miss.
Right. You become the judge of
Right.
the Pope. And again, there's a mountain of evidence of popes and councils saying the Holy See is judged by no one. You do not question the judgments of the Pope, whether they be in areas of faith, morals, discipline. It's repeated time and time and time and time and time again. The Pope is judged by no one. And so we have people here, and I myself included, where how much do I resist? How much, do I resist Francis at 80%? Would Burke, if he were to quote unquote win or get elected, whatever next time, maybe 30%? Like, who's the judge here? Who's the be all end all? And I remember you had Mario Dirksen of Novus Ordo Watch on, and I remember I was driving and I had his podcast on, and he said, "Can just imagine here, just think this through. The vicar of Christ comes together with the bishops in council, and they promulgate documents and decrees upon the universal church in every diocese throughout the world, and you have to listen to Taylor Marshall to think if it's something that can apply to you. And if that is what you're doing, which people do, I did that, so guilty. Who's the final judge? Who's the proximate rule of faith? And I'm not singling out Taylor Marshall exclusively, but just an example that I came up with quickly. Who's the final say here? Is it the Pope and the Council and the Church, or is it what Michael Voris tells me to do? Is it what Michael Matt tells me to do? Is it what the remnant publishers? Is that how I, as a Catholic, respond to this? And the position, it, I would come across. I have to give him credit. Peter Diamond and his videos were very eye opening for me. Father Chicata, Bishop Sanborn, who you had on, that was an excellent interview. Um, Novus Ordo Watch, all of these outlets, and I was just like, this makes sense. This has to be, because if I want to embrace church teaching, especially on the papacy, I can't have Bergoglio. I can't have Francis, and I didn't want to go there. I think it's a very scary position originally, and for somebody, I think you said it yourself, Kevin, you never really worked through this. um, uh, it's there is a point, I think, where you feel like, am I leaving the church if I do this? And that's very real. Um, but I had to remember, like, what is the faith? What is the church? And we're beyond. And I think people, even in the Recognize and Resist movement, these SSPX, the Society of, or I'm sorry, the Fraternity of St. Peter, the Institute of Christ Speaking, what have you, they know that this is not just a bad pope. They know that, I think anyway, that that they can see that Rome is promulgating a religion upon the entire flock that is not Catholicism. This is much beyond, some guy over there makes a bad decision, or some pope is like, not the most orthodox we could have hoped for, which is also kind of, it doesn't work that way. The pope is a guarantee of orthodoxy in the church, and I think really it's a misunderstanding of the papacy. It's a misunderstanding of the mystical body of Christ being the church, and how she promulgates her decrees and the faith. And really, it was just home for me when I went for the first time. And this is how I can wrap up this part. When I went for the first time, I suddenly felt at home, because I knew that no longer am I resisting. I'm not trying to battle my pope. I don't have any signatures on religious freedom, or ecumenism, or collegiality. I don't have any of this. I'm not tainted. I'm not stained. It was very, very liberating to say, I've accepted sede vacante, because there is the true faith. There it
And
all is.
did you have a moment where you it was just like, okay, yep, I have to go to sede vacantis mass, or how did that happen?
Before I think I was one before I
Yeah.
admitted it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that have said that too. I forget her name, but she tweeted something along those lines. Like, there's a journey here that people tend to go through, and it was weird to read that, because it was as if I wrote it. Yeah, as you said, there was a part where I knew I just couldn't say it yet. I felt that this is the position, but I couldn't quite embrace it. And I would say, I felt like, I would say Francis can't be the Pope, and then I would go to the Institute of Christ the King. And then I remember, just from serving the Mass, I knew where we were throughout all of the parts. And at the canon, una cum Franciscum, together with, I would I would cringe. And, how can that be? How can you join your prayer to the Supreme Pontiff, the Vicar of Christ, the final judge in matters of faith and morals, the chief of the apostles, the successor of Peter? How can I join my prayer to that and cringe? I opened with a quote from Pope Saint Leo IX, who said, let me just pull it up here really quick again. Through this Peter, through this chair, all of the comments of the heretics are disproved, rejected, and overcome, and the hearts of the brethren in the faith of Peter, which have never failed, be strengthened. The Pope, clinging to the Pope, is my guarantee that I possess the Orthodox true faith. That is my personal assurance. Otherwise, and I had to come to terms with this, otherwise, I'm mocking Christ. I'm spitting in the face of Christ. Pope Pius XII and Pope maybe Boniface VIII. I'm blanking on which one, but they said there are not two heads. There's not Christ and the Vicar of Christ. They make up one head. Where there is the Vicar of Christ, there is Christ. Where there's Peter, there's the church. And again, as I pointed out, this is echoed throughout the history of the church. This one voice spoke throughout popes and throughout councils, that this is one head here. And if I recognize and resist the Pope, I'm resisting Peter. I'm resisting Christ, this one head of the church. Extremely problematic. Very, very troubling, that I couldn't work through anymore. And I realized, the church can't hurt me. The church can't lead me astray. The church can't be an obstacle to my salvation. The church can't put me in a position where I have to sit here and pretend, as you said, to judge the Vicar of Christ, to judge, is what Rome gave me today Catholic enough? Who am I to judge that? And so arriving to this position was extremely liberating, and really, I knew that I had the fullness of faith. So,
well, and I think that it's a journey that we've heard before. I think the lady you talked about on Twitter, I think it's Martha the Zealot, and she was on the show,
right?
And she's
yes,
one who's had a very similar story, and it's happened before, and it's happened, and you can see it on Twitter. You see many of these people who they say everything sede vacantis, they say all the things, and then they say, oh, but no, you can't be a Sede Vacantist. So it's like, okay, come on, dude, you're already a Sede Vacantist. You just don't want to admit it.
Right, right,
And I think
right.
that as a cradle Sede, I'm unbelievably fortunate to have been born as a Sede Vacantist, and I know from that comes a lot of responsibility for my own soul. But I know that it's hard for us even to understand, the path people have to take. And I think it's easy to go and start, lumping people together and saying they're dumb or saying they don't understand, and da 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 da. And I think you got to be really careful. And anyone watching this, I know I have people in the R&R movement who watch this show, and I know
Yeah,
that people who watch this show watch Taylor Marshall. And God
yeah.
bless y'all. I mean, I'm super glad that you're here, and I hope that we're providing content that Catholics want to watch. And we're not trying to attack you. That's not what. Listen to Matthew. He was in it. He's been through it. This is not an attack. This is not. And I think from the other side, the R&R looks at Sedes as like we hate them, and it's like no, we absolutely don't. Many of us were
Most
you.
of it were there. Right,
Yeah.
right,
And it's just like,
right.
hey, no, we want you to come and as you said, I mean, come and realize the fullness of the faith, and get the load off your shoulders that you have to make all the decisions. That's not Catholic. I mean, as you said exactly right, the Pope is the guide. The church is our guide. We shouldn't be having to choose if the church is teaching us right or wrong. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Not shouldn't we? We cannot. That is
Yes,
dogma.
yes,
We
yes.
cannot decide if the church tells us right or wrong. And so, and it's really simple. And so, if you realize that, I think it opens the door where you say, okay, yeah, right. We have to go back and find when was the last true pope. And if you do your study, it's very clear and obvious that it had to have been Pius XII. And so he is our pope until we find another one, until we solve that issue or God solves it for us, which I hope and pray is sooner rather than later. Then we have to, we have to obey him in the church. And that exists. And I think people, people outside of state of consciousness, they look at it like, well, you have no authority. It's like, well, no living one, but we have 2,000 years of authority.
Right. Yeah. And to that, I can kind of say as well. Um, I wish that Twitter can be difficult. You're limited to characters. You're limited to interactions. It can be hard to read emotions. Some of these people, I think, they're one good face-to-face conversation away from making the jump. And I wish I could reach a lot of those people that way. Again, as you said, because most of us were there. I think Martha, you brought her up. We were there. We did this, and a point to kind of make, a question to kind of pose is, we'll all admit, you, I think everybody could admit that there's confusion, that people don't know, where do I go with this now? And we have never had anything like this in the church ever. There's never been such a divide. And where did the divide come from? What was the catapult? What kind of put this divide, or this time of confusion and agony into existence? The council. The council did that. There's a pre and post church. And if we can all center in on that point, that this confusion, this where do I go? Am I state of a conscious? Am I an SSPX? Am I Novus Ordo? Am I diocesan? What am I? Came from the council, after the council. And you have to admit that if that's the case, then the church, the mystical body of Christ, the guardian of souls, uh, caused confusion, caused error, caused caused despair, caused uncertainty. And then you have to ask yourself, can the church do that? And then if you say yes, that she can, then you need to do what I did and to go back and research, what do the popes teach about this mystical body of Christ, the church? Pius the 12th was very clear. Um, the mystical body of Christ, the Holy Catholic Church, and Christ himself, our Lord, form one person. It's one. And so if you're going to tell me that the church gave me error, that the church caused confusion, so too can Christ. And you wouldn't say that. Nobody would, no serious Catholic would say that. Can the church go through her passion like Christ can? Absolutely. She can and she will. But never while Christ hung on the cross did he lie. Did he blaspheme? Did he give me heresy? Did he give me suddenly a false doctrine? Neither can the church. because she is his mystical bride. She is his spouse, which Pius XI was clear will never be contaminated. Never will she be made false to her spouse. So people say, and I felt this too, well, the church is just run by bad men. The church just has evil men in it and whatnot. Okay. I think that's probably been the case throughout history. Evil men seeking to, I forget which pope it was, but 500 years ago, saying that there's a never ending war against this see, against this chair. They knew it. Since Christ died on the cross, Satan was waging his war against the church, and the best way to wage a war against the church is to attack the chair, the pope, the vicar of Christ. And so, if I truly believe that Christ cannot give me error, that Christ cannot lead me astray, I have to apply that to the church, because these men who are evil are promulgating these things as the church. It's not like somebody said, why don't we try this Novus Ordo thing on the side and just, have these few churches over here try it and just see how it goes. No, the Novus Ordo Missae is to replace the traditional Latin Mass.
Well, and they said in the documents, they said this church now, the Catholic Church subsists in the Church of Christ. So they actually almost like legally say we are only a part rather than the full truth. It's pure heresy. I mean, it's apostasy. I mean, it's not even. I don't understand how people even argue it. I mean, I got to be careful here. I'm not saying people are stupid, but I guess my point is, if you look into these things and understand what the church has to be, is exactly as you said, it has to be the mystical body of Christ. It cannot err. If that's the case, how can you possibly argue for Lumen Gentium, or any of these documents where they're clearly heretical? And I think that if people knew, and I think, it's interesting that like you say you were really kind of in love with JP2 back in the day. But yes. I bet you, and now tell me if I'm wrong here, I bet you some of that changed when you had more access to the internet. You could actually watch and say, oh, because back before the internet, people didn't know about Assisi. They didn't know. They seriously, your average Catholic had absolutely no idea that ever happened. And I bet you most people over 60 still don't, unless they're on the internet. But once the internet came about, these videos got loaded up. And that's the crazy thing, that these things exist now. We know all of these things that actually happened. And so I think, it becomes less and less of an excuse of ignorance. You just have to say, hey, yeah, this happened. And can it exactly as you said, can that happen? Can you go out in the parking lot after Mass, and talk with your buddy and say, wow, I hate our Pope. Wow, I hate him so much. I'm not going to listen to him. He guilty, what a clown. What a joke. What a clown. And people, and people do it. And I hear people do it publicly. And it's like, okay, wait a second. Calm down. First of all, I understand your sentiment. But secondly, can you possibly have that sentiment about a Pope? And you can't.
Yeah. The recognize and resist movement that I took part in anyway, and people have different stories, and I've talked about this with some people, and they're like, well, we don't have that here, and maybe that's true. But oh yeah, it was a fertile ground for bashing the Pope. I remember one guy in the parking lot, he stopped me and he was like, I want to pretend that he doesn't even exist. I'm going to ignore everything he says. And at the time I was like, yeah, you're right. I am more Catholic than the Pope. That's the only position. I said this once, I tweeted it, and State of a Contest, we're the only group that can say that we are not more Catholic than the Pope. The other groups do, because I think people misunderstand. People have said, and I misunderstood. I used to argue against this position, forever how long, that you're a side church, that you kind of, broke off. And in reality, it's the inverse. In reality here, we believe as Catholics exactly what the church believed when Pius XII was Pope. How do I know that? Because I'm embracing church doctrine on the papacy. I know from Pius XII to the apostles to the early church throughout the years, through Trent, through all the councils, the church teaching on the papacy. I embrace that. And the people who have gone off into the institute, into the society, into the indult mass, they have not embraced it. They've invented a new theology here, and they're coexisting with their Pope. They're moving alongside of him. And I think you and I, we talked about this before, the so-called consecration of Russia. Bergoglio had his humanistic, let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya prayer. By the way, Russia, Ukraine, society joined Francis in this consecration with their own prayer. which, unlike Bergoglio's, was beautifully Catholic and supernatural, mystical, uh, what you would expect the Pope to say. But then again, who's the authority here? Do I listen to the Pope, or do I listen to the Society of Pius X? Are they the gateholders of tradition? Is the Church found in the society? And I thought that at one time. Like, yes, the 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 four bishops, Lefebvre, they are kind of like the preservers of the faith. Which, okay, fine, but stop acknowledging the hierarchy in Rome. Who's valid here? And and people get triggered over this, and I don't care. It's a side church. You're doing your own thing while acknowledging Francis as Pope. If all these people, and again, I was there, so I can say these things because I feel like I have some sort of background with this. If you are faithful to the Institute of Christ the King, if you are faithful to the Fraternity of St. Peter, the Society of Pius X, go to the Novus Ordo this weekend. Go to the Novus Ordo. Because if you are accepting that these men are true, valid Catholic hierarchies, the Church is infallible in her liturgy. And they're going to say, I can't go. I don't want to go. It's harmful. It's not as good. I prefer the traditional Latin Mass. I can't put it's dangerous to go here. How can that's impossible. The Church didn't give you harmful liturgy. The Church is spotless. Trent says this. Pius XII. I mean, it's again and again and again and again and again. That same voice speaks throughout the 2 centuries of the Church. Her liturgy is spotless, and they'll avoid it. They won't go. I wouldn't go. I would never go. But I can't acknowledge these men as valid Catholic hierarchs, given me these harmful things. It's silly, and I think they know it. They're afraid to say the word "sede vacante." It's scary. It's a big step.
Well, was that an issue for you while you were there? I mean, I find this a lot when I watched I don't know if you watched the film, The Massive Ages Part 2, and it was, I think it's made by, I don't know, Fraternity of St. Peter, I think, maybe SSPX, but one of these groups, who they totally admit all of the issues with the liturgy. And so they spend that first half of the movie totally showing in a very, very well done. It's extremely well done. And they showed a great example of how they changed the liturgy of Vatican II. And I was watching this. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. I mean, this is incredible. What, I'm glad I watched this. And you get halfway through, and then, they have some very strange conclusions. I mean, some of their conclusions, first of all, that, well, it couldn't have been Paul VI. He just couldn't have known, even though he promulgated it, guys. The Pope promulgated it. But anyway, skip that whole thing. It's just Boudini. But I guess my point being, they make everything about liturgy, and liturgy is extremely important. And it is exactly as you said. You can't create an offensive liturgy. The Church cannot. So first step right there. I mean, that's a big one. But the Church is not only the Latin Mass. The Church is much, much, much more than the Latin Mass, for goodness sakes. It's tons of doctrine and dogmas and faith and morals, and it's not just liturgy. And I've talked with some guys who I talked with one guy who told me he's like, yeah, I'll sometimes go 1 week to the SSPX, and then the next to St. Peter's, and then the next to Sede Vacantis, kind of whichever works. And I'm like, wait, what? It's like, I mean, wait, I'm serious. I'm sitting there almost speechless. I mean, how could you possibly, get around that? How do you decide that's okay? And the answer is because the only thing that matters is the Latin Mass. And this is a big trick that the devil and the powers that be, they figured out. Hey, we're going to give you a cookie, guys. This is what, Benedict did this, and JP2 also with the indult, okay, you can have the Latin Mass and keep you a little bit happy. And they made it all about liturgy, and doctrine and dogma is just gone. Doesn't matter.
Right. Exactly your point. And I think in this modern time, we're just so used to, I can get in the car and drive 10 minutes and I have Mass. That is not the case throughout Church history. You didn't always have Mass. People, think about it. People in the fields of Portugal in, I don't know, the year 1300, they didn't go to Mass all the time like we might think today. They might be able to make the trip once a month. It differed from families. The faith wasn't the Mass. The faith was doctrines, dogmas, what we knew, our catechism. I can possess that. I could, I can't go to Mass, or I can't fulfill my Sunday obligation if the Church doesn't provide that for me. But I can still possess the Catholic faith. So the church says, we can sanctify Sunday by hearing mass, yes, but if I don't have mass, I can still be a Catholic. If there's nothing around, if I have absolutely no way of getting to mass or whatever, I can still be a Catholic. And you're right. It's more than the traditional Latin mass, because I can have, and I think I have to give him credit. Mr. Hess, Father Hess, was clear. A lot of these places do nothing but run museums. They've got beautiful quote unquote liturgy. They've got bells and incense and organ and chant, and it's heavenly. But what good is it? It's worthless. And we see this in scripture. We see this throughout the church. God does not hear the prayers of heretics. God hates the prayers. St. Jerome was very clear with this. It doesn't matter how reverent and beautiful. You can go to the most reverent Latin mass in the world. If it's done by an invalidly ordained priest, then it's worthless. Who cares? It's nothing. We have to move beyond that. You're right. What does the church teach? That are articles of faith that I have to possess in time and time and time and time again. Submission to the Roman pontiff is necessary for salvation. And I found that no one clings to that more than Sedevacantists. Nobody loves the Pope more than Sedevacantists, which is why we refuse to accept these men as valid popes, because they can't be, because they do things that are, they take action and they promulgate things that a true Pope is divinely prevented from doing. And that's how we know. A Pope, it's not that a Pope is just given the charge of teaching the faith. Like, while you're Pope, you might as well do this. No, it is a guarantee that he will. It is the promise that he will strengthen his brethren's faith. He will be that armor against heresy. All the popes, again, I can list a million examples, say that you are safe when you cling to the Pope. That is your assurance. If I'm a Catholic and I don't know what to do, where to go, how do I embrace the faith? I cling to the Pope. That's it. If I'm with the Pope, I'm in union with the mystical body of Christ. If I attach myself to the head, I have the body, and the church leads me to heaven this way. So to think that I am the judge of what I don't like coming from Rome, this horizontal coalition. I said this on Twitter, and I'll kind of say it again. We're a hierarchical organization. We're not like the Protestants. We have a pope, we have bishops, and we obey that vertical line of obedience. If you want to form, and there's this march, and I don't mind speaking out against it, this march for the traditional Latin Mass going from Virginia to DC or whatever. This is insane. We are not some horizontal coalition taking up arms to protest the hierarchy. I mean, who's leading the march? Martin Luther? Like, I can just see it. I think the intentions are good. And I want to say that. I think these people have a love for the faith. I think these people have a love for the church. I think these people have a zeal for souls. I will not deny that. But the position has to be critiqued. You can't fight your hierarchy. That is not what Christ set up. Pius X, when he was bishop, he said, obey your bishops, the group of bishops, the same way you would give obedience to the 12 apostles. That's who they are. That's what they are. If we rewind here, what would you be called if you were a horizontal left to right coalition protesting the actual apostles with Christ still on earth, the vicar? What is that? That's insane, and people are doing that today.
It's at least schismatic, right? I mean, at best, yeah, exactly. At minimum, it is schismatic, and I think that, again, and really to be clear, and we've said it several times now, but we're not trying to put people down here. We're not saying that people have bad intentions. Right. You're exactly right. I don't think these people who are involved in this, they just think that they're going to go save the church. They just don't have the proper understanding of what the church is. As you said, it's monarchical. It is not just we get to decide what is right and wrong. But it's so important. That's so important. And it's so important to not listen to me, not listen to Matthew. Go and do it on, figure out, what did the church teach? Go read what the church has taught. What did it teach for 2,000 years? Go look it up on your own. Now, I'm not saying go decide all of these things. Go up until 1958 and tell me what the church taught. And for all of these things, about the papacy, about the spotless bride of Christ, about heresy, about heretics. and then make your own decisions based on what the church has taught. And I know that sounds like you're deciding, but you're not. You're just going and saying, what did the church teach until it broke off, until someone formed a new church in, after 1958. So again, though, we're not criticizing people. We're not saying people are going to hell, but really look into it and don't think that we hate you, and don't hate us, for goodness sake. I think that's important to say too, that, people really look down on State of Faith contests when, some people, some State of Faith contests are misled. Look at the Diamond Brothers. They're a perfect example. But, in general, people are just trying to get to heaven, and I think that being the case there, that's ultimately the question, right? What is the truth? What is the church? What is the papacy? Go look it up yourselves. And hey, if you have any questions, you can send me an email at kevin89davis@gmail.com. Now, I'm not going to be the one who's going to answer them. So if you have a theological question, I am no theologian. As Matthew said at the beginning of the show, I am no church expert whatsoever. I'm an idiot podcasting from my office, but I'm a fortunate idiot that has a lot of friends who are priests. So if you send me a question, if you send me, hey, maybe you're interested in learning more about State of Faith contests. First of all, I can send you a bunch of really good videos from Father Chicata, Bishop Sanborn, Bishop Pivarunas, etc. And I can also connect you with a priest. So send me an email, kevin89davis@gmail.com. I'm not going to answer it, but I will try to connect you with somebody who can. Matthew, I really appreciate having you on. It's been really awesome to hear your story. And I hope people listen to it and say, hey, here's a guy who's been through something that sounds pretty familiar. And then they can do their own research and make their own conclusions.
Sure. Well, thank you, Kevin. It was a lot of fun. And as you said, I hope people who do listen, take up their own research and they actually read. They challenge themselves to read what does Pius XI say about, matters of faith and his encyclicals, and what does Francis say? Read the works. You'll go from this apostolic see has never allowed its subjects to take part in the prayer of non-Catholics to joining your prayer with those in the forest. That's like Francis wrote that, so you'll see the difference. So I encourage those listeners to take that step, actually read these documents and make your own conclusions, which you are indeed allowed to do.
Perfect. And while you're at it, go and follow Matthew at Matthew_Theo on Twitter. Bring him up to that 10,000 mark. Make him get a bit bigger of a head than he probably already has now. Boost his ego a little bit. But seriously though, he's a guy who's telling the truth. He's doing his best to spread the good word of what's true. And so go and send him. If you like this show, please like, share, and subscribe. Share it with your family and friends. Hey, share it with someone who sounds like they've been through something that Matthew's been through, who again started out as a JP2 Novus Ordo and went through all of the steps until he has finally found State of Faith contism, which is not just some crazy fringe movement. Again, I hope that we have shown that today. So again, Matthew, thanks so much. I hope to talk to you soon again. And until then, God bless.